Right. Well, Nora, thank you very much for coming along for interview. As you know, this is part of the admissions process, and we've seen your UCAS forms and everything, and we want you to be as comfortable as possible in this circumstance. We know that it's a stressful situation to be in, but please feel free to ask us to repeat questions if you don't follow what we're saying. Also, we're not going to be asking you trick questions. We're interested in what you're saying, and we would like this to be a conversation. Do you have any questions at this point?
No questions at this point.
Great, thank you. Ashleigh.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, Nora. I'm Ashleigh Griffin. I'm a professor of evolutionary biology in the zoology department. So I'm looking at your personal statement, and it's a really nice personal statement. So not all of them are very personal, but yours is giving us lots of a nice insight into why you're doing biology. I can see from a couple of things that you've picked out here that you're kind of interested in organs and anatomy, and that popped up a few times.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I come from China, and the supermarkets there work a bit differently than the supermarkets in the UK. So we have sort of just bins of chicken organs that are laid out in the fridges, and the butchers are sort of taking them out as they go. And as a child, and I have a vivid memory of this, I'm not really sort of just saying it. I think it's so interesting, and I just stand by and sort of like yell out the names of the organs I recognize. And my parents would have to actually drag me away from the butchers. And this sort of continued into elementary school. For some reason, they decided that it was a good idea to bring in some live fish and kill it in front of the children. That does sound a bit weird, but to me it was just not looking at the killing, but looking at the intricacies of the anatomy of these animals that really interested me. And that sort of continued throughout my school life.
Well, there probably isn't enough opportunity to look at organs in supermarkets for children in Britain.
Right? Yeah.
So that's great. And so then when you got your interest is developed through a book by Sean Carroll, Endless Forms Most Beautiful, which you wrote about a little bit in your statement. Can you tell us a little bit about how that developed your interest in anatomy and morphology?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started off, just looking at anatomy is interesting, but trying to understand how the anatomy is formed that way, and how sort of you go from one cell in an embryo into this whole entire formed organism, is another process, right? So I think this book really helped me understand that, because it went from the Evo-Devo perspective and looked at a lot of the genes that are related to how an animal looks on the outside and on the inside, and things that I had questions about as a child, like, oh, why can't we have an extra set of arms, or why do zebras have stripes? I was able to really get the answer off this book, but in a scientific manner, not just in this is why, in a sort of like superficial level. So that book really helped me develop my interest in that direction.
Great. So one of the things that about those questions that you've just listed there are about the things that make sense, right? So we can understand them as adaptations, but there's some things about anatomy and body plan that maybe don't make so much sense, right? Like why do we have appendix? Why do we have a blind spot? Things like that. So did you come across any of those and examples when you're thinking about these things?
Yeah, so just sort of the examples that you named, the appendix and the blind spot, there are two reasons why I can think of that sort of explain why they're still around. The first thing is a vestigial structure, right? So that's an appendix. Evolution can only act on what's already there, but it can't really remove anything, or sort of create a structure out of nowhere. So the appendix, I believe, is a remnant of us when we needed to eat less cooked foods and things that are less processed. And obviously as humans, we don't need that anymore, but it still remains because evolution hadn't had enough time to work on it to remove it, I guess. And also once it gets to a point, it's no longer having a significant enough of a fitness effect on the host or on the individual that evolution wouldn't really have a huge sort of fast action on it. So yeah. Oh, the blind spot. Yeah, I mean that's just a sort of adaptation. I guess you can't get around sometimes the anatomy of things. It has to attach somehow, right? The visual cord and everything. So I guess there's, yeah, as I said, evolution can't really perfect everything. Yeah.
Great. So that's brilliant. And then another thing that I noticed that I wanted to ask you about from your UCAS form is, as well as reading and thinking, some doing going on here as well. So you were you did an internship with an ophthalmologist.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very lucky in that I was friends with an ophthalmologist, and he offered me an internship. And what happened was I went to his practice and I shadowed him for about 2 months, and then continued working with him remotely after that. And we mainly looked at a drug that has previously been used in the context of heart disease and curing acne for some reason. And the hypothesis is that this active ingredient actually sort of changes the way that this very long chain acid gene, EVLOV4, I believe, is transcribed in the body. And we were just sort of doing a clinical study of how that would manifest in patients. Yeah.
Oh, great! That's a nice a nice insight into some research that you had there. Great, thanks very much, Nora.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand you over to Stephen now.
Great. So I'm going to try and share my screen if the technology allows. What we've got in front of you is are 2 images of a landscape in central Brazil. It's a landscape where the plants within it are adapted for dealing with periodic fires, and you can see that on the on the left-hand side we've got an unburnt landscape, and on the right-hand side we have a burnt landscape. And there are lots of plants, and they show a whole range of different adaptations. And what I have here in front of you are what some of the plants in that landscape look like a few days or a few weeks later after the fire. So to start with, could you just describe to me what you think you're seeing in these images?
I think I'm seeing some sort of succession. Well, the fire swept through everything and basically wiped out all the vegetation, and days or weeks later they're emerging again very quickly.
Yeah. What sorts of things are happening after this fire? What are these plants doing? You say that they're emerging, but they're doing specific things.
They're flowering.
Certainly, some of them are. Some of them are flowering. This sides are flowering. What do you think is happening here?
Germinating, producing leaves. I'm not sure what that bottom picture that plant is doing there, but yeah.
Right. This is actually starting to. This is starting to produce its flowers.
Oh, okay. I see.
This is only about 20 centimeters high.
Okay.
It's a bit, but it's starting to produce flowers.
Right.
So this, for example, is a tree that was within the landscape, growing perfectly happily. Then there was a fire. Then we've got these new leaves are being produced. Mm-hmm. So, what sort of things does the plant need to be able to respond to in order to be able to, for example, produce new leaves or produce flowers?
So would that be in the context of after a fire or just in general?
After fire.
After fire.
After fire.
I guess the first thing it needs to respond to is I guess noticing that the fire has happened, so that it has been destroyed. I mean, that would be quite straightforward, right? It has been destroyed, and that some sort of stress is in the environment, and that's the other thing, right? Like I would assume that after a fire there would be some sort of stress factor, either temperature changes or nutrient changes and things like that. And then I guess it has to notice that the fire is over and that it is safe enough for it to start regrowing and that it wouldn't be destroyed. That's what I'm thinking of right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there is some perception of the environment. Given what you're seeing here in terms of these things flowering here, or these things producing new leaves here, where do you think that most of that action is happening?
Like in terms of where in the plant, or
where in the plants, where specifically in the plants do you think this sort of action is happening?
I think in the meristems. Would that be correct?
Yes, absolutely. It's about buds, about the ability for essentially to be able to protect buds. So can you think of any ways in which plants may be able to protect their buds?
Yes. So the first thing I can think of is just some sort of physical covering that goes over it. That could either be some, I mean, it would be quite difficult to make something completely fire resistant, but at least sort of tough enough to cover it, some sort of, or it could be tucked away in the plant. That's sort of like physical covering, but maybe it's sort of more towards the inside. Then when it's burning, it wouldn't get to that bit. Yeah, or it could just have a lot of them, I guess.
Right. That's three really good ideas, some really good strategies. You have an excess of them. You bury them away, or you essentially have a covering that might be disposable in some way.
Yeah,
absolutely. And in fact, that's what you're seeing in each of these cases. So these plants have adapted to this landscape where you've got these periodic fires. They do very well in these fires sometimes. So, for example, this is a case where the flower is produced about 2 days after the fire. So it flowers very quickly. Thinking about the point of view of the plant within this landscape, what's the advantages to being able to occupy this type of landscape?
First of all of the competition has basically been wiped out. It's on a blank slate and it can sort of spread very quickly. Second, a fire sort of burns down all the organic material. Now you've got a layer of soot, which is really nutrient rich. So I would imagine that, you know, if you can disperse and reproduce very quickly after that, your progeny would have a really good chance of surviving. That's what I can think of right now. Yeah.
So you quite rightly point out that those two, competition and nutrients. Can you think of any examples of nutrients that might be being released by the fire within this landscape?
Definitely carbon. Because it's burning down. I'm not sure that that's correct.
But do plants use carbon in its form of carbon?
No, because it uses carbon dioxide. So instead, I would think nitrogen. That's usually important. Some sort of. I'm not too sure, but some sort of. Phosphorus maybe.
Phosphorus, yep. Nitrogen, phosphorus are two really good examples that the plants need. So you've identified essentially competition. What sort of competition are we talking about?
I can think of two types of competition. So you've mentioned that the plant on the bottom right is only about 20 centimeters tall. So that means it's dealing with competition that are the same height as the plant. So sort of understory competition, occupying the actual space on the ground. And also competition in terms of like overstory, so canopies and things like that, trees covering up the sunlight. And both of those would probably be wiped out. I wouldn't say wiped out completely, but the understory would be sort of destroyed and the canopies would be at least sort of thinned.
Right. Right. So those are perhaps examples, and they're good examples of what we might think of as interspecific competition. Are there any other forms of competition that might be being eliminated or reduced within this landscape?
So you've mentioned interspecific, so I'm thinking intraspecific. Maybe
sounds like good logic.
Yeah. So maybe if if the other individuals of this species have been wiped out. I mean, they occupy the same exact niche, right? All of them.
Yeah.
So if there's less of them, then the few individuals that are left over can spread their genes and sort of spread very quickly after a fire.
Right, absolutely. So, and there's another interaction that might be going on within this landscape that these plants can benefit from after fire. Do you have any ideas of what that might be?
I'm thinking of I'm sort of thinking of animals interacting with it. Am I on the right track?
Certainly there are animals interacting in this landscape. I was not actually thinking of a plant-animal interaction.
Right. Do you mind giving me a small hint as to which direction?
What is a problem for plants, or in fact any organisms, when their densities increase? Potentially.
When their densities increase.
Yeah.
Would it be like local density? Sort of...
Yeah. So if you've got a very high density of things, there's something that can happen within those populations in terms of an interaction that can be.
I see. Would it be the concern of inbreeding and sort of lack of outcrossing?
No.
Oh
no. Certainly that isn't it. Certainly that would be an issue, but it's not the one I'm thinking about.
Right.
Think about an interaction with another group of organisms.
With another group of organisms, when the density increases.
Yeah.
God, I'm thinking of fungi.
Right. Go with fungi. Think of what might be problematic for these plants that's associated with fungi.
Oh, would it be sort of pathogens interacting with them? Okay.
Yes.
So if the density is too high, then pathogens can spread between them very, very quickly and wipe them out, which would not be ideal. So if you have a fire, wipes out some of them, increases distance between individuals, then pathogens don't spread as easily.
Right.
Yep.
And what's fire also doing to the pathogens?
Killing the pathogens.
Absolutely. Great. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Right, Nora, so we're going to change tack a little bit now and do a little bit of data interpretation. I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, so Nora, let's get started on this. So we're going to use some data to solve a biological mystery. And the mystery I want you to solve is what's going on in this photograph. So tell me a little bit, like, just very quickly, like what you can see here in this photograph.
I can see two beetles, and I want to say the one on the left is male, just because it has ornamentation on its head. I am not too sure about the one on the right. It would probably be a female, but please correct me if I'm wrong, because I do know of the possibility of sort of like males having different phenotypes in the same population. So yeah.
Yes, so it would be a good guess normally to expect that we're looking at male and female here, but you're quite right. In this species, we have two different morphs of males, and in fact, these are both males as adult beetles. Okay,
right.
So that's the mystery that I want you to solve. Okay, I'm going to give you some clues. All right, Nora. So just take a minute. Have a look at this figure for me, and tell me what you think it's telling. What information you can get from it about the beetles.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk my thoughts out loud here. So the first graph I see on the left-hand side that says body size and number, it looks like a normal distribution of body size, which is usually expected in any given population. And the second graph that I see is horn length and number, and that looks like it's bimodal, with a lot of individuals that have small horns and a lot of individuals with large horns, but not many in between. And then the body size versus horn length one, it looks like a sigmoidal curve. Is that correct? And it looks like, sorry, 1 second, let me just take a look. It looks like the correlation between body size and horn length is in linear. So as the body size gets larger, between like 4.5 to 5.5 centimeters, that increases really, really fast. But before that, horn length tends to be quite like quite sort of stable, in that it's quite small, and then after that there's sort of a diminishing returns with the horn length, and it doesn't get larger at a high rate anymore.
Yeah, good. So if you could just summarize for me in a sentence, what this, all putting those bits of information together, describing the distribution of the two different morphs in beetles, how would you do that?
There are two different morphs, a lot of individuals in each morph, but not many that are hybrid or in between.
And anything else?
In terms of
so what else is this figure telling you? So there's two different morphs in terms of horn length. Anything else?
And but it's not necessarily and in terms of, sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, take your time.
Would it have to do with body size? But body size is normally distributed. So smaller body sizes sorry. Would it be smaller body sizes usually correlated with a smaller horn?
Yes. Yeah. So the small horn beetles tend to be the smaller beetles, right? Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's easy to overthink.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Thank you, Nora. What I'm going to do now is, in the next picture, I'm going to give you a clue as to why that is. All right. So now we've got a picture of what's going on. Now we're going to think about why we're seeing these patterns. Stephen, can we have the next picture, please? Thank you. So this is a diagram showing a lifestyle of this beetle. Can you just take a little minute there, Nora, and tell me what you think's going on?
So it looks like there are two males and one female, and they're probably competing to mate with the female. And so now I know it's a dung beetle because there's a pile of dung. And it looks like the male, one of the males is guarding the pile of dung, where I assume the entrance of the sort of nest is, or the whatever the burrow is, and the sneaking male is going from it's tunneling into the burrow and avoiding the guard male, so that it could get to the female.
Yeah, so it definitely looks like that. Do you think that the guarding male is guarding the dung pile?
I think it's probably guarding the female so that other males can't get to it via the actual opening of the burrow. Yes. But the dung pile could also be guarded, I'm assuming, because it's, a source of nutrients and source of food and all that. So, yeah.
Yes, it certainly is a valuable resource, but the beetle being underground underneath the dung pile, is more likely that he's worried about his female.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think? How do you think this might correspond to the information in the previous slide?
So it looks like that. Well, there are two roles that males play in this situation. One is guarding, one is sneaking. And I would assume from the picture that you showed me at the beginning, that the ones with the ornamentation on their heads would probably be the guarding males, because they can. Well, it's quite intimidating to look at a horn, I guess, and they could fight other males with that horn, presumably. And the sneaking males, if they're smaller and don't have as much sort of bulk on them, they could quickly dig a burrow and sneak into to mate with the female and avoid the sort of conflict with the larger male with the horn.
Exactly. Yeah. No, the male with the horn doesn't look very sneaky, does he?
No. He's quite obvious.
He's very obvious. Great. Yeah. No, so you're absolutely right. And now the next information I'm going to show you is more data that helps us understand how that might have evolved. So there's lots going on here. So we could take it slowly. Have a minute just to familiar yourself with it, and ask me any questions you like about anything that you see there. We're going to start with the left-hand figure when you're ready.
fitness. So just curious, tactic A and tactic B, which one would be, well, I guess that would be one of the questions I would have to answer.
So I'm afraid you're going to have to tell me which one is which.
You're right. So I'm looking at competitive ability and fitness. Competitive ability, is that just in terms of, I guess, how many females it mates with, or
no, it means like ability to win a direct competition.
I see.
Male,
Okay.
Male, yeah.
I see. And fitness would be reproductive fitness, I assume.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Low, high. Right. So from looking at this, I think tactic A would probably be guarding. And tactic B would be sneaking, because I'm looking at it because the slope of tactic B is a lot flatter, and that means there's not as much of a difference with its ability to fight others. It's mostly about, I guess, how it sneaks in and how many females it could find. Whereas with the other one, you really need to be able to win fights to get high fitness. But there's a high fitness associated with that, and that's, the females. I guess they mate more females or sire more progeny. Yeah.
Yes. No. Perfect. Very nicely put, Nora. So, thank you for that. And finally, looking at the figure on the right-hand side, we are looking at some more actual data. So the one on the left is a sort of a prediction, if you like, and now the one on the right is some actual data.
Mm-hmm.
Have a little look at that, and when you're ready, talk me through what information you can get from it.
So the pronotum, would that be, which part of the beetle would that be?
That's the width across the thorax.
I see. Okay.
Which is the middle section. It's how big the beetle is. It's a way of estimating the size of the beetle.
I see. Okay. So I see two groups in this graph. One with a sort of flat slope in terms of pronotum width and proportion of offspring sired, and then one with a sort of positive correlation between the size of the beetle and the proportion of offspring sired. And I'm thinking the group that is represented by the open circles would probably be the sneaking males, because the size of them don't matter as much since they're not fighting other beetles. They really just need to dig a burrow and find a female, right? Whereas the fighting males and the guarding males, they have to fight others. So the larger they are, the more advantage they get, and the more success they would have in terms of mating, and proportion of offspring sired. And I would assume that when they're guarding, there could still be other males coming in to mate with female regardless. So if they're better at fighting, they're sort of reducing that amount, and that's probably why the percentage isn't at 1 and is rather at like 0.25 or 0.3. I guess they can't guarantee, right?
Yeah. Great. That's really well done. Thank you. Now I'm just going to ask you, so lots of details there. Could you just sum up the biology of this system for me in a couple of sentences, like putting all this information together? If someone asked you, like what's going on in this photograph, how would you answer?
So I would say in this system, there are two morphs of males, one with a horn and one without a horn. And in this system, I presume that the females can multiply mate. It is not just a one-off mating situation. And there are two tactics that are associated with these morphs that the males can take. One is to guard the females and fight other males that are coming in to try to mate this female, and that is associated with the larger horn morph. And the other tactic is to sneak in, avoid conflict with the guarding male, and to mate with the female without the guarding male noticing, and that is associated with the no horn morph. And any strategy in between is probably not going to be evolutionary favored, so it's one or the other, and that would be what happened in that photograph.
Great, thank you very much. Race through that really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's the end of the material, but maybe we should ask you a couple of, like, sometimes people ask, like, why do you want to come to Oxford? Why do you want a biology degree? Don't they, Stephen? Yeah. why do you want to study biology?
So at the risk of sounding cliche and sort of, I did really like biology as a child, and that continued. And I feel like every child starts off with a lot of questions about the world, and I really got the chance to explore that further, like through the personal statements that I talked about. So through the books and through the courses. But the one thing that stood out about biology to me is that it always stuck. Whatever I learned, it always sort of seemed so interesting to me. So I have this very vivid memory of me in a biology class watching this animation of a Golgi body. And I'm just thinking, that is in every single one of my cells in my body. That is ridiculous. How do we know that this is what's happening? And how is this so intricate? And how do these things know what they're doing? And yeah, I mean, it's always been at the forefront of everything I explore. I see a bee, I think, where is it going? What is it doing? And yeah, I'm just really glad that I get to pursue that in school, and hopefully I'll get to pursue it at university as well. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. I think that's everything. Have you got any questions for us?
Yeah. So how is the degree actually structured at Oxford? I'm not too familiar with it.
It's obviously a 4-year. It's obviously a 4-year degree. So it's an MA. The final year is entirely research. The years 1, 2, and 3, you gradually get to specialise from a common first year, and that is there to give students a taste of a very wide range of biology, perhaps biological ideas, types of biology that they're not familiar with, haven't been familiar with from school, and everything, and just so you can see the types of things that go on, and then you get the option of being able to specialize as you go through.
I see. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Well done. I just very quickly though, I think what Nora did really well there was that people should take note of is that she didn't immediately know the answer to all the questions, right? So sometimes she wasn't quite sure what we were asking for. We didn't ask it very clearly, or there was some sort of clarification needed, and she didn't panic. She just sort of took the time to ask questions to get the clarification she needed to carry on the conversation, and that's a really key strategy, good strategy to have in the interview, I think, to not panic if you don't know the answer to something, because we're deliberately confronting you with something we don't think you'll have seen before.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's I think the other aspect of that is that Nora took the time to think about an answer, didn't jump in immediately with the response, and also took on board the additional information that was being thrown out, particularly in circumstances where the questions were not perhaps as clear as they could have been, or they were deliberately vague to see how you would respond to the unknown. I think that it's important to take your time to answer the question.